Has Dave Canales been the best of the rookie head coaches in the NFL in 2024? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where not tomorrow, as tomorrow's Christmas Day, but next Wednesday, the weekly Wednesday mailbag is back for one final time of this regular season. And then once we're into the offseason, it's the weekly Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers all the way until we get to the preseason. Either way, all you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter, X at Julian Council, to get your questions in for the weekly Wednesday mailbag following Sunday's game against Tampa Bay. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And let's spend some time today talking about Dave Canales and a job that he's done so far here in 2024. As the Panthers sit at 4-11, they have successfully doubled their win total from a season ago. Now, you know, my hope going to the season was that this team could not double their win total, but triple their win total and go 6-11 in 2024. And that sounds a lot better when you say triple than when you say 6-11. But anything is better than a 2-15 season that we all had to endure back in 2023 with Frank Reich getting fired after 11 games, Thomas Brown not doing a great job as a play caller, and up in Chicago, things aren't much better this year with another rookie quarterback in Caleb Williams. Bears not doing so great after all, thanking Carolina for the draft picks, and it's led to them also being 4-11 this year in 2024. So suck it, Chicago. But let's bring it back to here locally, talking about the Carolina Panthers. That win on Sunday right now feels like the signature win for Dave Canales in 2024. The win against Las Vegas, as cathartic as it was after just two dreadful weeks to start off his tenure in Carolina, at New Orleans, home against the Chargers, the Raiders suck. They just ended a 10-game losing streak by beating the Jags and pissing off their entire fan base because they no longer have the number one overall pick and they are in desperate need of a quarterback. So goodbye, Shedeur Sanders. Goodbye, Cam Ward. You will not be playing for the Las Vegas Raiders, it looks like, in 2025 unless they're going to give up a boatload of picks. And there's plenty of teams desperate for quarterbacks this offseason, and there's just not enough quarterbacks to go around. So that win, all right, good win, but they suck. Looking at it also, the Saints, also terrible. They fired Dennis Allen after that game, which was kind of what happened whenever the Panthers beat somebody. Minshew gets benched. They fired Dennis Allen. So that win, not that impressive, but good to see Bryce Young play well in that game like he did after coming back the week prior against Denver, having a couple interceptions, but then late in that game, we saw Bryce able to hit some downfield shots and move the ball down the field, really clean up in garbage time. So you wondered, could he carry it over to the next week? And he certainly did. But New Orleans, they're having issues, and we saw that on Monday night as they got shut out 34-0 against the Green Bay Packers. Cam Jordan, our old friend who sent a broom to Cam Newton once upon a time after they swept the Panthers that season, he's on Twitter apologizing to the fans. Apology unaccepted, but actually welcomed here in Carolina, Cam Jordan, as the Saints. They're awful. And then in Munich, they beat the Giants. The Giants are terrible. And I have no idea how Joe Schoen, who used to be back in the scouting department here in Carolina, who's a general manager now up in New York, and in Brian Daboll, the head coach, how they're going to keep their jobs. How can John Mara be this patient when he has planes flying over MetLife every Sunday saying, fire the GM and head coach? But that is a game that also not that impressive a win, but nice to have back-to-back wins, go in the bye week feeling good, feeling like you would turn a corner as far as this team goes. But really Sunday, against a Cardinals team that had to win. They didn't know going into it whether the Rams would win or lose, but they had to have known in overtime when they're going for it on 4th and 2 from their own 18-yard line, a complete and utter lack of respect for Ejiro Evero and this Carolina Panthers defense. They had to have known a tie did them nothing. They had to win that game, and for Carolina to step up in there to beat that team in OT, kind of give it away like they did a couple weeks ago against Tampa, as that game also should have never gone to overtime. Impressive to get that win against that team that apparently J.C. Horn was saying throughout the game, was telling the Panthers that they stunk. Well, hey, Cardinals, you're also not going to the playoffs this season, so enjoy your 7, 8, whatever 9-win season it ends up being, where you're going to also be on the outside of the playoffs. And let's say this, have a worse draft pick than the Carolina Panthers. So looking at what Dave Canales' team has done since week 9, they're 3-4. They have completely turned things around after a pretty dreadful 1-7 start to his tenure here in Carolina. And you look at the next 2 games, at Tampa, a team they should have beat a couple weeks ago, at Atlanta, a team they absolutely can beat, now breaking in a rookie quarterback in Michael Penix Jr., the Panthers can get off to a 5-4 finish heading into 2025. And that is my preferred scenario. I know we talked about last week, would the best case scenario be for Carolina to be in a position that New England Patriots currently find themselves in, where they currently hold the number 2 overall pick, and they already have their quarterback of the future. Now, there's certainly more questions about Bryce Young's future in Carolina than there are right now about Drake May's future up in New England, but to be in that position of power, having a thirsty team behind you, desperate to get up there to be able to get Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado or Cam Ward out of Miami, that may have been the best case scenario. As you don't move back that far, you get a massive haul. And we've seen in the past, if you're not the Chicago Bears, how that can help a team really build. And the Panthers need to continue to build, even if they find a way to win out the next couple of games. But had they lost 7 in a row and had they lost out the end of the season, finished 3-14, that could have been a good thing for them. But I think a better thing is establishing this culture and foundation, things that we have heard from Frank Reich, from Matt Rule over and over again, as the Panthers have been constantly rebuilding since like the 2019 season. But to be 3-4 right now with the chance to at least be 4-5, you would think. I don't think they're going to lose these next 2 games. I think at very least they're able to split them, but possibly win out the rest of the season, the final 3 weeks, and in 5-4 in the second half of the season. Like, that could be a really good sign of what Dave Canales can do here long-term in Carolina. And when I look at the rookie head coaches across the NFL, is Dave Canales the most impressive of them so far? When you look at it, his team has become a complete pain in the ass. The Chiefs barely got out of Charlotte with the win, with all those Chiefs fans in the stands. The Bucs, who laid a massive egg on Sunday night against Dallas, even though the Cowboys have not quit clearly. That's a game that the Bucs should not have won, but they've been the best team, in my opinion, in the NFC South, even if they don't end up winning the division. Philadelphia has been phenomenal, and they finally had their 10-game winning streak ended, or I think 11 games actually ended on Sunday against Washington in dramatic fashion. Arizona had to win to stay in the playoff picture and lost to Carolina. This is exactly what you wanted to see out of this team this year. You get out to a bad start. You're trying to figure out who your quarterback is, who this team is going to be, what the identity is going to be. But in the second half of the season, they're a team that I'm not saying nobody wants to face, but they're not an easy out like some of the other teams at the bottom of the NFL with first-year head coaches like Gerard Mayo's New England Patriots. They're 3-12. They played Buffalo kind of hard on Sunday, but that has not been a good team. They have not nearly been as competitive as the Panthers have been so far this season. They've lost 5 straight, and it's just been a win, a long losing streak, a win, a long losing streak. That is not what's happening right now in the second half of the season here in Carolina, where the Panthers have been right there in all these games. That's not been the case for Gerard Mayo and his Patriots, and there's a lot of talk about him being a one-and-done this year up in New England. Brian Callahan, he's somebody who the Panthers actually wanted to interview. He was one of the hot coaching candidates after what he did as the OC in Cincinnati, working with Joe Burrow, who is having a career year without him, likely going to be the comeback player of the year in the NFL here in 2024. So I guess it wasn't really Brian Callahan, as it's been a mess in Tennessee. They're 3-12. They're not competitive at all. And you wonder how long that's going to last for him in Nashville. Antonio Pierce, he gets a job after being the interim a year ago, and looking back what happened a couple years ago when the Raiders went to the playoffs when they had Derek Carr and Rich Bisaccia was their interim head coach. Mark Davis, their own, decided, no, I want Josh McDaniels, which is just an insane thing to ever want. The worst coach in the history of the NFL, instead of having a respected special teams coordinator and Rich Bisaccia, who turned out to be a solid head coach as an interim, and now is doing a great job in Green Bay and going to the playoffs for his second year in a row. So that blew up immediately in Mark Davis's face. So he decided this time around, let me keep the interim. Let me keep the coach the players love in Antonio Pierce. And well, that is also backfired as the Raiders are 3-12. They had a 10-game losing streak until Sunday when they also beat the lowly Jags. And now they don't have the number 1 overall pick. So not much hope right now in Las Vegas or in Tennessee. Certainly there is in New England because of Drake May, the Charlotte native, how he's played since stepping into that starting role. But the only rookie head coach you can look at here in 2024 who's outperforming Dave Canales is probably Mike McDonald up in Seattle. And the big reason is he has Geno Smith. He has a much better situation that he inherited. The situation in Tennessee, not ideal. New England, also not great. Bill Belichick, what were you doing there at the end? Looking at the situation here in Carolina, not great. The Raiders, Pierce kind of was already there, so he's part of the problem, but maybe the solution that they thought. Mike McDonald has Seattle 8-7. They could win out. If they get some help, they could win the NFC West division. So he had the best situation. He's done a really good job, I think. But when you look at the situations that all these coaches inherited and where they have their teams at right now, I think it's hard to argue against Dave Canales being the most impressive of the rookie head coaches, even with a 4-11 record, because you look at how his team's performing, what the expectations were, all the trials and tribulations this season. And speaking of the trials and tribulations this season, and maybe this is one that was self-created by the coach, Dave Canales, after 2 weeks, he benched Bryce Young. And you look at the maturation of Bryce since being benched, those 5 weeks on the bench. Now he had some little cameos there in Chicago, also in Washington. But since he's come back, he has actually been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL when looking at PFF, Pro Football Focus, on Sunday. In week 16, he was the highest graded quarterback with a 91.7 grade. If you subtract the Dallas game, going back from week 9, subtracting week 15, week 16, he's the 5th highest graded quarterback in the NFL, according to PFF. Now, if you want to add in the Dallas game, he's 7th. So he's been one of the top 7 quarterbacks in the league over the second half of the season. And that's exactly what you wanted to see, because the only reason Dave Canales is hired here was because of the work he did with Geno Smith as a QB coach a couple years ago in Seattle, what he did last year with Baker Mayfield as the OC in Tampa, and no team in the league outside of Carolina even interviewed him. So you were looking at how things were playing out with Bryce and his messaging about Andy gave him the best opportunity to win, even though Andy wasn't playing that well. And Bryce was the guy the Panthers gave up so much for, and he could be the future where Andy was never going to be the future. I really question, is this the right guy? Is he handling things the right way? And I still question it, even after how Bryce has played so far over the last couple of weeks. But looking at the other quarterback situations and how those coaches have handled it, he's probably the only one who's really gotten it right. Now, it did take a car accident, but of course, behind the scenes, we don't know what he's been doing with Bryce Young. And the messaging wasn't about development, but clearly he's had a role to play, even though I'm more inclined to give more credit to Bryce than necessarily over to Dave Canales. But Antonio Pierce, he's flip-flopping quarterbacks early on this season, going from Gardner Minshew to Aiden O'Connell, back to Gardner Minshew, and then Gardner gets injured, O'Connell gets injured. They got to go to Desmond Ridder. It's been a mess in Las Vegas. Looking at Brian Callahan, he's dog-cussing his quarterback. It's week 2, as Will Levis is doing some of the dumbest stuff you're ever going to see, the king of whoopsie daisies. And the best option behind Will Levis for Brian Callahan is Mason Rudolph, who threw 3 picks in that loss on Sunday against Indianapolis. So that's not been encouraging at all for someone who I think Tennessee hired to work with a young quarterback and get the best out of him. Not quite sure you can get the best out of Will Levis other than just don't turn the football over, which that's going to be very hard for him. But he's not done a great job at all. Gerard Mayo, it made sense. They're going to start off with Jacoby Brissett, eventually go to Drake May. They did that, and I think he's gotten it right, even though I questioned at the time, are you putting Drake May behind a bad offensive line with no playmakers? And that has been the case. But Drake, y'all know I'm a Carolina guy. Love Drake May. He's been good so far. And then Mike McDonald never had a decision to make. It's always going to be Geno Smith. Bringing in Sam Howell, he was never going to be the quarterback out there. So looking at the rookie head coaches, other than Gerard Mayo, who had to make a decision, and McDonald didn't have to make one at all, Canales has ended up not doing too bad as far as quarterback decision-making here in Carolina and development of that player. So kudos, credit to him. It's not like Mayo's an offense coach anyway, so he's not having anything to do with development of Drake May. McDonald also defensively, Geno Smith. Well, who developed him? Dave Canales. So it turns out Dave Canales, he ain't half bad after all. After looking at what he's done this season, a lot of questions about play calling, about the Bryce Young decision, but comparing him to the rookie head coaches, and it's not like this is the strongest group of rookie head coaches, he's probably been the most impressive through 16 weeks of the 2024 NFL season. So a job well done, and hey, maybe David Tepper got it right after all. Speaking of, Dave Canales spoke to the media on Monday following the game against Arizona, looking at the film, and had a couple of updates. Go over those updates here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And looking at FanDuel right now, what is going on with this line? The Panthers are being utterly disrespected. They are 7.5-point underdogs on the road at Tampa on Sunday against a team they should have beaten a couple of weeks ago. And a Bucs team that just laid an egg against Dallas. They're plus 360 money line, over under set at 49.5 points. So they're expecting this to be a decently high scoring game. That is nuts to me. But I'll tell you this, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's talk more about Dave Canales as he met with the media on Monday following his film review of the Panthers' win against the Arizona Cardinals 36-30 in overtime as Chuba Hubbard high-stepped into the end zone. I know on Sunday I said he waltzed into the end zone. No, high-stepped into the end zone. And it's been a while. It's been a long time since we have watched a Panthers player do something like that in a walk-off victory. So great redemption for Chuba Hubbard. Great for Bryce Young to bounce back, and just overall awesome to see how this team has come together and played over the last 7 weeks. Currently 3-4 with an opportunity to be 5-4 in the final 9 games of the season here in 2024. As Dave Canales, in my opinion, has been the most impressive of the rookie head coaches in the NFL in 2024. Cade Mays was unable to play on Sunday. He's been the starter at center for the last couple of weeks for Carolina. Interesting conversation that we'll have in the offseason about whether Cade will come back and be the center next year, or if the Panthers decide to find somebody else. Maybe Austin Corbett comes back. Brady Christensen can play that as he did on Sunday. So conversation that we'll have coming up in a couple of weeks here on the show, as there's plenty to get into about the offseason, the team building here in Carolina, especially if things really end up on a boom, on a high end here in Carolina. But Cade Mays had an illness, could not play on Sunday. So Brady Christensen came in, stepped in, and Canales was impressed by how Brady played. But looking at PFF, he had a 51.4 grade. That was the second lowest among offensive players on Sunday. Had a 40.4 passing blocking grade. That was also very low, 53.7 run blocking grade. So according to PFF, at least, Brady Christensen didn't play all that well, but Dave Canales was impressed, and he is an asset. The fact that he can play tackle, can play guard, can play center, can play all across the offensive line. Very curious to see what happens to Brady this offseason. Davion Sanders, since going out on that backboard, which was a scary scene against the Chiefs a couple weeks ago, he has not been a part of the passing game, and Dave was asked about his lack of involvement. And looking at it, going back to that KC game, he had 3 receptions for 49 yards and 3 targets. I do think that they close out that drive with a touchdown had he been available. Now, Steve Spagnuolo, great defensive coordinator, great scheme that they were running there as the Panthers failed 3 times to throw the ball on third, and well, not 3rd and 10, but from the 10-yard line there on the goal to go situation, had to settle for a field goal right before the half. Would have been nice to have JT Sanders. But since coming back, he missed 1 game against Tampa, but coming back the last couple of weeks, he has 2 targets in 3 games, including 0 versus Arizona on Sunday. And when asked about it, Dave Canales had this to say, saying, quote, "It's a matter of opportunities, the way they fell. It's not been by design. The ball hasn't found JT. It's about the rhythm and flow. We have to do a better job of trying to find a way to get him involved." And you would like to see that. Going into the final weeks of the season, you want to see guys like Jalen Coker involved, as he's going to be here with Bryce Young moving forward. Hopefully, if everything works out the same way. Xavier Legette, you'd also want to see him, if he's able to return, to be able to have that continuity of Bryce Young. And that goes with JT Sanders as well. And speaking of Xavier Legette, he missed Sunday with a hip, a groin, wrist. It's listed as hip on the injury report. I recall it being groin that Dave Canales first brought up when talking about the injury he suffered a week ago. Either way, he didn't play on Sunday. He's week to week. There was a question of whether he would come back this season. And when asked about it on Monday, Dave said, quote, "He's progressing really well. We're taking it day to day with him." He was going through a return to play protocol through the weekend to make sure we were on top of his availability for this week. We like the strides that he's taking, but he's going to have to make pretty significant improvement in the next 2 days as we continue to evaluate him, but we definitely want to get him back out there. So I thought maybe why not just sit him the rest of the season? I do understand development-wise, continuity-wise, trying to build what you have here right now with Bryce Young and his offense, want to get your first-round rookie wide receiver out there for the last couple of weeks. But if he's banged up, not healthy, what are you really going to be getting out of him in that situation? He is not sounding like a guy who needs to be 100% in order to play. There's guys like that, and that's not what I think about Xavier Legette at all. So we'll see next 2 days. And by the way, the Panthers are out on the practice field on Tuesday. Traditionally, Tuesdays are their off days. They'll be off on Christmas Day on Wednesday, then back out there on Thursday and Friday before traveling down to Tampa, I believe, on Saturday. The face off against the Bucs on Sunday. So Legette, it's trending in a good direction, but still has significant improvement to make. Now, the Panthers did make a roster move on the Monday. They cut Jonathan Harris, defensive tackle, who recovered a fumble on Sunday. Michael Carter, he got the ball way too high up in his chest. Kyler Murray, not great handoff exchange there. That was fumble. Jonathan Harris, the defensive tackle, picked it up. Good play for him. But then he finds out the next day, you're not on the team anymore. Why? Canales mentioned on Monday that they needed to address the inside linebacker position. As we saw on Sunday, Josie Jewell, Jacoby Windman, the undrafted free agent out of Michigan State, they started at linebacker. John Radigan was also on the roster. Not enough depth there, as Trevor Wallace, Claude Sherrill out for the rest of the season. So they went back to find an old friend on Tuesday, Chandler Wooten, who's been in San Francisco the last couple of weeks on the 49ers practice squad. He's now back in Carolina, more of a special teams ace, but somebody they probably believe in more so at linebacker than they do John Radigan, who I didn't see get any snaps on Sunday. I have to go back and double check that, but did not believe he played a single defensive snap on Sunday as Jacoby Windman and Josie Jewell were the starters there at inside linebacker. So that's an update from Monday's press availability from Dave Canales. On Fridays throughout the entire season, we do keys to victory. And then on Tuesday, come back and review those keys to victory. Let's see how the Panthers did here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. Whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks Plus. This holiday season, they're going to give away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. On Fridays, I give you my 3 keys victory heading to that Sunday's game for the Carolina Panthers. Then here on Tuesday, we review those 3 keys victory, whether the Panthers won or lost. Looking at it, key number 1 was don't give up 200-plus yards on the ground. The Panthers had 3 straight weeks heading to Sunday doing just exactly that. And in those 3 games, well, the Panthers lost. Now, not only because they gave up 200 yards rushing, but it's hard to win games if you're constantly getting gashed on the ground, which unfortunately is the reality here in Carolina. This is by far the worst run defense in the NFL and by far the worst run defense in the history of this franchise. And that may call for some big changes after the season on the defensive side of the ball as far as the coaching staff and, of course, personnel as well. Heading to the game, James Conner was 10th in the NFL with 973 rushing yards. Kyler Murray had not been run a lot this season, only had 3 games of 7 rushing attempts. That was his high so far this year. He had gone over 75 yards only once this year. And the Cardinals had not eclipsed 200-plus yards on the ground since week 9 versus the lowly Chicago Bears. Well, they did it as they rushed for 206 yards and 6.1 yards per carry. 4th straight week now, Carolina's allowed 200 yards on the ground, but they win. This time, as we know, James Conner was outstanding in the first half, had 12 carries, 111 yards, 9.3 yards per carry, and a touchdown. By halftime, there was 1 drive that was similar to, not 1 drive, but 2 straight drives similar to the one that Bucky Irving had a couple weeks ago here in Carolina for the Bucs, where Conner had 105 total yards. Now, one of those drives is really aided by the Jacoby Windman hip drop tackle. The first time this season that has been flagged. I believe there's been like 17 that have been later on fined as far as players receiving fines for those. But the first time in game and on the broadcast, Dean Blandino, the Fox Rules analyst, said it was a bad call. Dave Canales, when talking about it on Monday, also said did not look like it was to him. It should have been 2nd and 9. Instead, it gave them a 15-yard penalty and really helped the Cardinals on that drive. Now, I do think Arizona maybe finds a way to still move the ball on that drive, but getting to have a fresh set of downs and not starting behind the chains at 2 and 9 or at 2nd and 9 certainly helps out. But they ran the ball over Carolina when James Conner was in the game. Now, fortunately for Carolina, unfortunately for James Conner and the Cardinals, he only had 3 carries for 6 yards in the second half because he left with a knee injury after Josie Jewell twisted him up. Did not look that bad upon review, but still was not able to come back. Cardinals were more of a pass-happy team after that. Now they did get Kyler Murray to run a little bit more, had a season out of 8 carries, then 63 yards, 20-yard touchdown run in that second half. I think specifically in that 4th quarter as he cut the lead into Carolina. I think it was 30-27 at that point in time. So the Panthers not great against the run and have not been great against the run all season long. And I suppose the next 2 weeks against a Bucs team that ran for 200 yards on them and a Falcons team that also likes to run the ball, they're going to struggle against the run. But if they don't turn the ball over, like they didn't on Sunday, that can help them win the game. And speaking of not turning the ball over, key number 2, hold on to the football. The Panthers had only played 2 games this season, entering Sunday without a turnover on offense. Week 3 at Vegas, a win. Week 12 versus Kansas City, almost a win. But then they had 6 games of multiple turnovers and only 5 games of 1 turnover. Now they have 3 games without turning the football over this season as they won the turnover battle 2-0. And that was a big differentiator in this game as you look at it. First downs, total yardage, rushing, all of that, 3rd down conversions, red zone, goal-to-go situations, all fairly even. The only thing that separated these teams was the turnovers. Carolina did not turn it over. Arizona did, and the Panthers won the game. Then key number 3 wasn't really a key. It was just a hope. Send the fans off with a win at home, and the Panthers were able to do that. They had only won 3 games at home the past 2 seasons. Now, they've successfully won 3 games at home this season, putting that home in quotes as technically the game in Munich was a home game. Of course, the win against the Saints was a home game. The win on Sunday was a home game. So 3 home wins we'll call it for the Carolina Panthers here in 2024. And if they can find a way to win one of these last 2 games, they'll notch 2 road wins for the first time since 2022. So only won 2 games last year, both at home. And going back to 2022, won on the road at Seattle after a long streak of not winning on the road, and won to close out the season in walk-off fashion against New Orleans. So it'd be nice if the Panthers can get back to winning some games on the road more consistently in the final 2 weeks of the season, but really heading into 2025. So those were our 3 keys of victory from last Friday heading to the game against Arizona. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Getting y'all subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back next Wednesday for the final edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag. Then we're going to head over to Fridays throughout the entirety of the regular season, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me following the game on Sunday against Tampa Bay. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. And I wish all of you who celebrate a Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to y'all on Thursday for a Crossword Thursday episode with James Yarko, the host of Locked On Bucks.